The dense forests of Gaul in 57 BCE concealed one of the most extraordinary military encounters in ancient history. A small Roman force, outnumbered 25-1, transformed a potential massacre into a devastating victory that would echo through the annals of military strategy for millennia. This was not merely a battle, it was a masterclass in discipline, tactical innovation, and the psychological warfare that made Rome the dominant power of the ancient world. The strategic context: Caesar's Gallic Gambit. To understand this remarkable engagement, we must first examine the broader context of Julius Caesar's Gallic campaigns. In 58 BCE, Caesar assumed command of the Roman provinces of Cisalpine Gaul, Transalpine Gaul, and Illyricum. What followed was not merely military conquest, but a calculated campaign to secure his political future in Rome, while simultaneously expanding Roman territory and influence. The Gallic tribes, despite their reputation for fierce independence and martial prowess, were politically fragmented. This disunity proved to be their greatest weakness. While individual tribes could field enormous armies, some numbering in the tens of thousands, they rarely cooperated effectively. Their warfare was characterized by passionate charges, individual heroics, and a reliance on overwhelming numerical superiority rather than coordinated tactics. The Roman military machine that Caesar commanded represented the culmination of centuries of tactical evolution. The legionary was not simply a soldier, but a highly trained professional who could construct fortifications, operate siege equipment, fight in formation, and adapt to varied combat situations. Each legion comprised approximately 5,000 men, organized into cohorts, maniples, and centuries, a flexible structure that allowed for rapid tactical adjustments. The Nervi, warriors of the forest. Among the Gallic tribes, the Nervi held a fearsome reputation. Inhabiting the region of modern-day Belgium, these warriors had cultivated a culture of militant austerity that would have impressed even the Spartans. They rejected wine and other luxuries as corrupting influences, believing that such indulgences weakened martial spirit. Their society was organized around warfare, and every able-bodied man was expected to be ready for combat at a moment's notice. The Nervi had observed Roman tactics with keen intelligence. Unlike some Gallic tribes that stubbornly adhered to traditional methods, the Nervi studied their enemy. They noted how Roman cavalry operated, how legionaries constructed their marching camps, and how the legions moved through territory. This intelligence gathering would inform their audacious plan to ambush Caesar's forces. In the summer of 57 BCE, Caesar was campaigning against the Belgic tribes, who had formed a coalition to resist Roman encroachment. The Nervi, along with their allies the Atrebates and Viromandui, assembled a force that ancient sources claim numbered around 75,000 warriors, though modern historians often suggest more conservative estimates of 30,000 to 40,000. Even at the lower estimate, the Gauls would enjoy overwhelming numerical superiority. The march to disaster. Caesar's intelligence network had failed him. As his legions marched through Nervi territory, he believed the enemy to be at a considerable distance. The Romans were moving in their standard marching formation, a long column that prioritized speed and efficiency over immediate combat readiness. 6 legions accompanied Caesar, along with auxiliary forces and the massive baggage train that supplied a Roman army on campaign. The Roman marching order placed the first 6 legions at the front, followed by the baggage train of the entire army, and finally 2 newly recruited legions bringing up the rear. This arrangement made logistical sense, but created a dangerous vulnerability. The army was stretched over several miles of forested terrain, with limited visibility and restricted ability to rapidly concentrate forces. The Nervi had chosen their ambush site with brilliant tactical acumen. The location was near the Sambre River, in a landscape of rolling hills covered with dense forest. The river itself presented both an opportunity and a hazard. It was crossable, but would slow any force attempting to traverse it. On the far side of the river lay open ground that would appear inviting to the Romans as a campsite, but the forest on the opposite bank concealed the entire Nervi army. The Gallic commanders understood Roman procedure with remarkable precision. They knew that when the Romans found a suitable camping location, they would immediately begin constructing their fortified camp, a process that involved stacking arms, dispersing to gather materials, and dividing attention between construction and security. This moment of distraction would be the perfect time to strike. The killing ground. As the Roman vanguard emerged from the forest and saw the open ground beyond the Sambre, they did exactly what the Nervi anticipated. Caesar ordered the army to make camp. The first 6 legions crossed the river and began the familiar routine of camp construction. Soldiers set down their shields and pila, javelins, took up entrenching tools, and began marking out the camp perimeter and digging defensive ditches. The Roman cavalry and light infantry spread out to screen the main force, but the dense forest limited their effectiveness. They could not penetrate far enough into the woods to detect the massive force concealed there. The Nervi, displaying remarkable discipline for warriors known for their aggressive nature, held their positions and waited. Behind the main Roman force, the baggage train was still struggling through the forest paths, with the 2 rear legions, the 13th and 14th, escorting it. The Roman army was at its most vulnerable, divided, partially disarmed, and focused on construction rather than combat. Then, with devastating suddenness, the forest exploded with humanity. 30,000 Gallic warriors burst from the tree line in a massive wave, moving with shocking speed. The Nervi had trained for this moment, rehearsing rapid movement through the forest terrain. They fell upon the Roman cavalry first, scattering them almost immediately. The auxiliary forces, composed of Gallic allies of Rome, broke and fled in panic. The main body of Gauls crashed into the Roman legions with the force of a natural disaster. The Romans, caught dispersed and without their full equipment, faced annihilation. Warriors poured across the river, surging up the slope toward the partially constructed camp. The situation transformed from routine camp construction to desperate struggle for survival in a matter of heartbeats. Discipline against chaos. What happened next reveals the fundamental difference between the Roman military system and the Gallic approach to warfare. A less disciplined force would have disintegrated under such an assault. The surprise was total, the odds overwhelming, and the tactical situation catastrophic. Yet the Roman response, though desperate, was anything but chaotic. Centurions, the backbone of Roman military effectiveness, immediately began organizing their men. These veteran officers, promoted from the ranks based on merit and combat effectiveness, were positioned throughout each legion specifically to handle such crises. Without waiting for orders from higher command, they rallied soldiers to their standards. Men grabbed whatever weapons were closest, not necessarily their own, and formed defensive lines. Caesar's account of the battle, while certainly self-serving, describes a scene of controlled chaos. Soldiers who found themselves near the standards of different cohorts simply joined those units, rather than waste precious time finding their assigned positions. This flexibility, impossible in a more rigid military structure, allowed the Romans to present organized resistance despite the complete surprise. The 9th and 10th legions, positioned on the Roman right flank, were the first to achieve something resembling a proper formation. They advanced to meet the Atrebates, who had attacked from that direction. Roman discipline and superior equipment told immediately. The legionaries, even partially equipped, could form the testudo, tortoise formation, and other defensive arrangements that made them formidable in close combat. Their short gladi, swords, were designed for the brutal close-quarters fighting that developed, while their scuta, large rectangular shields, provided protection that the Gauls' smaller shields could not match. The Roman right flank managed to drive the Atrebates back, pushing them down the slope and across the river. The Gallic warriors, brave but lacking cohesive command structure once battle was joined, began to lose their initial impetus. Some legionaries even pursued the retreating Gauls across the river, though this would prove premature. The center collapses. While the Roman right flank held and even advanced, the center and left of the Roman line faced catastrophe. The main body of the Nervi, the most numerous and fierce of the Gallic forces, struck the 7th, 8th, and 11th legions with overwhelming force. These legions had even less time to organize than their comrades on the right flank. The Nervi fought with suicidal courage. When the front ranks fell, the warriors behind them would climb over the bodies of the dead to continue the assault. This was not mindless savagery, but a calculated tactic. The fallen bodies actually helped the Gauls ascend the slope more easily and provided stepping stones to close with the Romans more quickly. The Roman defensive line began to buckle. Men were being wounded and killed faster than gaps could be filled. The cohorts were compressed together, losing the spacing necessary for effective sword work. Soldiers found themselves so tightly packed that they could barely raise their weapons. The situation was approaching the critical point where organized resistance would collapse into rout. The 11th Legion, on the far left, found itself nearly surrounded. The Nervi, having broken through or bypassed other Roman units, were threatening to envelope the legion completely. If this occurred, the entire Roman left would disintegrate, and with it any hope of victory. The carefully trained legionaries were dying in droves, their discipline barely holding against impossible odds. Caesar's intervention. Julius Caesar, whatever his faults as a politician, or his ambitions as a would-be monarch, was an exceptional combat commander. Throughout his campaigns, he demonstrated a personal courage that inspired his soldiers and a tactical intuition that often salvaged desperate situations. The Battle of the Sambre would showcase both qualities. Caesar had been with the right flank when the assault began, and he had seen those legions stabilize. Recognizing that the true crisis lay at the center and left of his line, he moved toward the danger. This was not simply brave, it was militarily sound. Roman soldiers fought more effectively when they could see their commander sharing their danger. The Romans called this quality of leadership virtus, and it was expected of generals who commanded loyalty. Arriving at the collapsing left flank, Caesar found a scene of carnage and chaos. The 11th Legion was being pushed back steadily, its formation compromised, its officers fighting in the front ranks simply to maintain any semblance of order. Caesar did something that speaks to both desperation and tactical understanding. He grabbed a shield from a soldier in the rear ranks and pushed to the front line. The general's presence electrified the soldiers around him. Caesar began calling out to individual centurions by name, rallying them, and through them their men. He ordered the cohorts that had been compressed together to spread out, creating space for effective sword work. This was basic tactical adjustment, but in the chaos of battle, it required authoritative direction that only the commanding general could provide. Caesar then ordered these cohorts to form a hollow square, a desperate defensive formation used when surrounded or nearly so. This allowed the Romans to present a shield wall in multiple directions and prevented the Gauls from attacking the vulnerable rear and flanks of the formation. It was a holding action, nothing more, but it prevented immediate collapse. The relief force. While Caesar struggled to prevent disaster at the center left, the Roman baggage train and its escort legions were still making their way forward through the forest. The 13th and 14th legions, hearing the sounds of battle ahead, increased their pace. These were newly recruited legions, untested in the harsh crucible of the Gallic wars, but they were about to face their baptism of fire. Lieutenant Titus Labienus, one of Caesar's most capable subordinates, had been with the right flank during the initial assault. After pushing back the Atrebates, Labienus gained a vantage point from which he could see the disaster unfolding at the Roman center. With excellent tactical judgment, he immediately ordered the 10th Legion to reverse course and attack the Nervi from behind. This decision exemplified the flexibility that made Roman military organization superior to that of their enemies. In the rigid command structures of many ancient armies, such an independent decision by a subordinate officer might have been impossible or would have required time-consuming consultation with the supreme commander. Labienus recognized the crisis, had the authority to act, and did so without hesitation. The 10th Legion, already flushed with success from routing the Atrebates, wheeled and drove into the rear of the Nervi forces. The timing was impeccable. The Gauls, fully committed to their assault on the Roman center and sensing victory, suddenly found themselves under attack from behind. The psychological impact was devastating. Simultaneously, the 13th and 14th Legions emerged from the forest and immediately grasped the situation. Rather than stopping to assess or waiting for orders, they deployed straight from march formation into battle lines and attacked the Nervi flank. The raw recruits, who might have been expected to panic at such a chaotic introduction to warfare, instead demonstrated the value of Roman training and discipline. The trap springs. Shut the Nervi now found themselves in the nightmare scenario of any attacking force, caught between multiple enemy formations with no clear line of retreat. The warriors who moments before had been on the verge of annihilating several Roman legions were suddenly fighting for survival. The Gauls attempted to adapt. Some warriors tried to break off the assault on Caesar's position to face the new threats, but this created gaps and confusion in their formations. Others continued pressing the Romans in front of them, hoping to break through before the forces to their rear could make a decisive difference. The result was a loss of cohesion that the Romans immediately exploited. Caesar, seeing the pressure on his position ease, ordered his cohorts to transition from defense to attack. The Romans who had been desperately holding their ground now pushed forward. The legionaries had recovered their breath and their formation, and they fought with the fury of men who had faced death and survived. The short gladius, designed for stabbing in close formation, proved brutally effective as the Romans pressed together behind their shields and systematically cut down the Gauls. The Nervi, trapped in a steadily tightening ring of Roman steel, fought with a courage that even their enemies acknowledged with respect. Caesar's own account praises their valor, noting that warriors would climb over the bodies of the fallen to continue fighting, and that some threw captured Roman pila back at the legionaries. This was not the behavior of a routed army, but of men fighting with the desperate energy of those who know no quarter will be given. Anatomy of annihilation. The transformation from potential Roman catastrophe to Gallic disaster occurred with remarkable speed. The factors that had favored the Nervi during their initial assault, the element of surprise, overwhelming numbers, and the advantageous terrain, now worked against them. The same forest that had concealed their approach now blocked lines of retreat. The river that had slowed the Romans now trapped the Gauls against pursuing legionaries. Roman tactical superiority manifested in several key ways during this phase of the battle. First, the legionaries maintained formation discipline even while advancing and attacking. The Gauls fought as individual warriors or in loose groups. The Romans fought as a machine. Each legionary protected the man to his right with his shield, while the man to his left protected him. A simple system that required training and trust, but was devastatingly effective. Second, the Romans had superior equipment for prolonged close combat. The Gallic longsword, while fearsome in the initial charge, was less effective in sustained fighting, especially in crowded conditions. The Roman gladius, typically only 18-24 inches long, was designed specifically for stabbing in the tight confines of shield wall combat. The scutum, the large rectangular Roman shield, provided better protection than Celtic shields, and could be used offensively to punch and disrupt enemy fighters. Third, the Roman command structure allowed for rapid tactical adjustments. Centurions could make decisions at the century level, approximately 80 men, tribunes at the cohort level, 480 men, and legates at the legion level, 5,000 men. This distributed decision-making meant that opportunities could be exploited and problems addressed, without waiting for orders from supreme command. As the ring of Roman steel tightened, the Gallic casualties mounted catastrophically. Warriors were being cut down by the hundreds, then thousands. The Nervi leadership, unlike the Romans, fought in the front ranks according to their cultural traditions. This meant that tribal leaders and experienced warriors were disproportionately represented among the casualties. As these leaders fell, Gallic resistance became increasingly uncoordinated. The final count ancient sources claim that the Nervii were virtually annihilated as a fighting force. Caesar's account states that of the 60,000 warriors and 600 senators of the Nervi tribe, barely 500 warriors and 3 senators survived. While these numbers are almost certainly exaggerated, Caesar had political incentives to inflate both enemy numbers and casualties. There is no doubt that the Nervi suffered catastrophic losses. Modern historians, applying more rigorous analysis to the casualty figures, suggest that the Gallic force probably numbered 30,000, 40,000, rather than the inflated figures in ancient accounts. Even using these more conservative estimates, the Nervi losses were staggering, probably in the range of 20,000 to 25,000, killed or wounded, out of a force of 30,000, 35,000. This represents a casualty rate of approximately 70–80%, making it one of the most complete destructions of an army in ancient warfare. Roman casualties, while not trivial, were remarkably light given the circumstances. Caesar mentions that many centurions were killed or wounded, not surprising given their position in the front ranks, but does not provide specific overall casualty figures. Modern estimates suggest Roman losses were probably in the range of 1,000–2,000 killed and wounded, or roughly 10–15% of the engaged force. The disparity is stunning. For every Roman casualty, there were likely 10 or more Gallic deaths. The psychological impact of the defeat extended far beyond the immediate battlefield. The Nervi had been considered among the most formidable of the Belgic tribes, and their annihilation sent shockwaves through Gaul. Other tribes that had been contemplating resistance to Rome quickly reconsidered. Several sent embassies to Caesar seeking terms, preferring negotiation to the fate that had befallen the Nervi. Factors in the Roman victory. How did 200 Roman legionaries, the approximate strength of the 2 relief legions that turned the tide, contribute so decisively to destroying a force 25 times their number? The answer lies in multiple intersecting factors that reveal much about ancient warfare and military effectiveness. Training and discipline. Roman legionaries underwent rigorous training that emphasized formation fighting, endurance, and the ability to execute complex maneuvers under stress. The average Roman soldier had far more training than his Gallic counterpart. While Gallic warriors were often brave and skilled individually, they lacked the systematic training that made Roman formations so effective. When the 13th and 14th legions deployed from march formation into battle lines under combat conditions, they were executing a complex maneuver that required extensive practice and coordination. Equipment advantage. The Roman military-industrial complex provided standardized, high-quality equipment to its soldiers. The lorica segmentata, segmented armor, or lorica hamata, chainmail, worn by legionaries provided far better protection than the equipment available to most Gallic warriors. Many Gauls fought with minimal armor, relying on shields and courage. The Roman gladius was specifically designed for the type of close-quarters formation fighting that characterized major battles. The pilum, the Roman javelin, was engineered to bend on impact, rendering enemy shields useless and preventing the weapons from being thrown back. Command and control. The Roman command structure allowed for coordinated action across the battlefield. When Labienus ordered the 10th Legion to reverse course and attack the Nervae rear, he was making an independent tactical decision that required no consultation with Caesar. This distributed decision-making authority meant that opportunities could be exploited rapidly. By contrast, the Gallic forces, once battle was joined, largely fought as individual warriors or tribal groups with limited coordination between units. Tactical flexibility. Roman military doctrine emphasized adaptation to circumstances. The legionaries could fight in open order against irregular forces, form dense shield walls against charges, create hollow squares when surrounded, and rapidly transition between offensive and defensive postures. The Gauls, for all their individual prowess, fought primarily in one mode, the massed charge followed by close combat. When this approach failed to break the Roman lines, they had limited tactical alternatives. Professional versus warrior culture. Roman legionaries were professional soldiers who served for decades. Their identity and social status depended on military effectiveness. They fought not just for tribal honor or personal glory, but as part of a military system that rewarded effectiveness and punished failure. The Gauls, by contrast, were warriors rather than soldiers, a subtle but crucial distinction. Warriors fight for personal honor, glory, and the respect of their peers. Soldiers fight as part of a system optimized for military victory, regardless of individual glory. Strategic implications. The Battle of the Sambre had consequences that extended far beyond the immediate tactical victory. It demonstrated Roman military superiority in a manner that no amount of smaller engagements could have accomplished. Tribes throughout Gaul received the message. Numerical superiority, surprise, and advantageous terrain were insufficient to overcome Roman discipline and tactical acumen. For Caesar personally, the victory secured his position in Gaul and enhanced his growing reputation in Rome. He had faced a crisis that would have destroyed a lesser commander and had prevailed through personal courage, tactical flexibility, and the quality of his forces. The battle featured prominently in his Commentarii de Bello Gallico, commentaries on the Gallic War, ensuring that Roman readers understood the magnitude of the victory and the competence of their general. The destruction of the Nervi as a military power removed one of the most formidable obstacles to Roman control of Belgic Gaul. While other tribes would continue to resist Roman expansion, none would match the Nervi in their combination of martial skill, discipline, and willingness to face Rome in open battle. The psychological impact of the defeat may have saved Roman lives in the long run by discouraging resistance that would have been futile. From a military history perspective, the battle exemplifies several principles that remain relevant in warfare: the importance of training and discipline, the value of flexible command structures, the decisive nature of tactical reserves, and the advantage of coordinated combined arms operations. All these lessons from the Sambre remain pertinent. The human cost behind the numbers and tactical analysis lies a human tragedy of staggering proportions. The Nervi did not simply lose a battle, they lost a generation of fighting men. For a tribe of perhaps 100,000, 150,000 total population, the loss of 20,000, 25,000 warriors represented a demographic catastrophe from which recovery would be extremely difficult. Ancient sources indicate that the Nervi had committed virtually their entire military-age male population to the battle. This was not uncommon in ancient tribal warfare, but it made defeat exponentially more catastrophic. Tribes that lost a small portion of their forces in one engagement could recover and fight another day. The Nervi had wagered everything on their ambush succeeding and lost. The survivors faced a grim future. With so few warriors remaining, the tribe was vulnerable to aggression from neighboring tribes as well as from Rome. Their lands would be occupied, their autonomy lost, and their culture gradually eroded by Romanization. Within a few generations, the fierce warriors who had nearly destroyed Caesar's legions would be producing Roman soldiers, speaking Latin, and worshipping Roman gods alongside their traditional deities. For the Romans, victory came at a significant cost in human terms as well. While total casualties were relatively light compared to the Gauls, the death of experienced centurions represented a significant loss of institutional knowledge and leadership. These were men who had survived years of campaigning, whose experience and tactical judgment were irreplaceable. Their widows and children, if they existed, would receive compensation, but the legion would feel their absence in battles to come. Legacy and lessons. The Battle of the Sambre resonates through military history as a testament to the importance of training, discipline, and tactical flexibility. Military theorists from the Roman period through to the modern era have studied the engagement for lessons applicable to their own contexts. The most obvious lesson is that numerical superiority alone does not guarantee victory. The Nervi achieved complete surprise, enjoyed overwhelming numerical advantage, and fought on advantageous terrain of their own choosing. Despite all these factors favoring them, they were annihilated. Superior training, equipment, and tactical doctrine overcame all these disadvantages. The battle also demonstrates the value of tactical reserves. The arrival of the 13th and 14th legions at the critical moment turned near defeat into crushing victory. Modern military doctrine still emphasizes the importance of maintaining reserves that can be committed at decisive points, a principle the Battle of the Sambre validates dramatically. The role of leadership proves equally important. Caesar's personal intervention at the crisis point, while perhaps not strategically optimal from a command perspective, provided the morale boost necessary to prevent collapse. Labienus's independent decision to attack the Nervi rear exemplifies good mission-type tactics, where subordinate commanders have the authority and initiative to exploit opportunities without waiting for orders from higher command. For military historians, the battle provides a vivid case study in the Roman military system at its best. The legions demonstrated all the qualities that made them the dominant military force of the ancient Mediterranean world: professional training, superior equipment, flexible tactics, distributed command authority, and remarkable discipline under extreme stress. The Battle of the Sambre stands as one of the most remarkable military engagements in ancient history. A force of approximately 1,200 Roman legionaries, arriving at the critical moment, helped transform a potential catastrophe into a victory so complete that it effectively destroyed an entire tribe's military capacity. The engagement showcased the Roman military system at its finest and provided lessons in tactics and leadership that remain relevant more than 2 millennia later.